Bonjour à tous et bienvenue à ce deuxième épisode de Romance Christmas. Mon nom est Nickel et j'espère que de votre côté, vous allez bien. Donc au courant du premier épisode, ça fut un épisode assez relax où on a fait la rencontre de trois personnages qui vont être probablement majeurs au courant de cette histoire-là. Tout d'abord, on a rencontré un chat du nom d'Elegant. On a rencontré aussi un dragon rouge du nom de Hanzox, qui est un barde et qui a l'air de vouloir faire payer toutes sortes de choses. On a rencontré notre tavernier qui est Tsarn, donc un dragon à écailles bleues. Où c'est que tout ça va nous mener? Ça risque d'être intéressant. Je vous souhaite un bon visionnement.
The day after the body was discovered, the detective arrived at the town in the afternoon. He learned from the gossip in the tavern that on the night of the miller's death, two people had spent the night in the mill, but they both had alibis. Who were they? One was the miller's daughter, the other was the miller's apprentice. They had spent the night in the mill as usual. About those two people, I'd like to know. Ah! Donc on a un apprenti puis on a la fille du Millers. Donc Millers, on s'entend que... En tout cas, whatever. Ça doit être le gars qui était comme du mill. Imagine pas, je suis sûr que c'est pas son nom. En tout cas. Ah, à propos de l'apprenti. What about the miller's apprentice? The apprentice's name was Hans. He came to the mill from the next town 8 years ago. At that time, he was just 10 years old and all alone in the world. No parent could be so cruel if it weren't because of money. Money. Fortunately, the miller treated him well. The apprentice was also very clever. He always seemed to be able to succeed, no matter how complicated the miller's order. Voilà. Donc, j'aimerais savoir aussi à propos de la fille. J'aimerais avoir des informations à propos de la fille du miller. Helena, the miller's daughter. She's 16 years old and a grey wolf. She had no shortage of suitors in town and even caught the eye of a few local nobles. On n'oublie pas qu'elle a la même race que nous autres. And not just because of her father's wealth. She was also renowned for her beauty. She had been a dream girl for every bachelor in the town since she was 14 years old. She had a good relationship with her father, or at least other outsiders thought so. Recently, there was a rumor that she had a close relationship with the miller's apprentice. Oh boy, laisse-moi penser. Laisse-moi penser. Ok. Donc, la première déduction, c'est que le miller aurait été tué peu de temps après être retourné chez eux. Donc, il était encore dans son manteau et tout, donc il n'y avait pas eu le temps de se déshabiller ni rien de ça. Tout le monde dans la ville a un alibi quand il est mort. Le corps n'a aucune blessure. Il pourrait avoir, malheureusement, d'une façon accidentelle, glissé et tombé du panier dans lequel il était pour réparer le fameux windmill. Donc la cause de la mort serait inconnue, mais il pourrait s'être cogné la tête contre le mill. Mais on a aussi, au niveau du love, ici, on a une histoire d'amour entre la fille et l'apprenti de ce fameux Miller. Donc, il se pourrait que ça n'ait pas été apprécié du Miller, puis que ça pourrait être une cause du meurtre. I have to say, those two caught my interest. Please go on. What about the miller's reputation? The miller had lived his entire life in the town and had no enemies. He was well regarded by the townsfolk. His wife died of puerperal fever shortly after she gave birth to Helena, and he had lived as a whole bachelor ever since. Donc, sa femme est décédée d'une fièvre qui a été causée suite à la naissance probablement d'Helena, malheureusement. Puis il a vécu seul depuis ce temps-là. C'est triste. He had several drinking friends we did meet with in the pub almost every night after supper, drinking and talking until the tavern closed. Ok, donc on sait qu'il y a plus de femmes, il y a plusieurs amis avec lesquels il boit. Qu'il rencontre après le souper. Bon. It sounds like some of the tavern's regular. Some folks at the tavern provided the detective with additional information. The miller had been extremely generous recently, and one day he even brought everyone in the tavern a round of ale in celebration. That's all the information on those present. Having gotten his fill of gossip from the noisy drinkers in the tavern, the detective left the tavern and went walking toward the mill. Within 10 minutes, the detective arrived at the mill. It was clear and windless the morning. The snow at the gate of the mill hadn't been swept away by the overzealous villager. The detective, relieved and cautious, checked the snow from the outside. The snow was unexpectedly clean. Intéressant. Apart from the footprint left by the villager who found the corpse in the outer circle, and the footprint that went all the way to the front of the house, there was nothing except some messy traces in front of the last footprints. It seemed that there was no shortcut or alternate entrance. The detective put on his hat and came to the mill door. He glanced down by accident before entering the door. There seemed to be a circular imprint around the last footprint, in front of the door, and the stone used to hold the door open had also been moved. Stepping inside, the detective met Elena, who was covering her face and crying, and Hans, who was comforting her. The body of old Miller was still hanging on the windmill, swinging like a pendulum in the wind. Do you want to listen to their testimony first or go straight to the scene? Ok, qu'est-ce qu'on fait? Leurs histoires ou la scène d'investigation? Il y a plusieurs choses qui peuvent être intéressantes. De toute façon, leurs histoires peuvent être super intéressantes avant de nous faire avancer, c'est sûr et certain. On n'oublie pas que s'il y avait des pas jusque-là, ça veut dire que le personnage est probablement tombé du haut de le truc avec quelqu'un qui est à l'intérieur qui l'aurait poussé. La scène. Ok. On va aller voir ça. Donc, on va juste prendre 2 secondes, juste voir. Ok. La pierre utilisée pour retenir la gate a été bougée. Cool. Ok, on y va avec la scène. Let's investigate the scene first. Well, don't you want to ask Gilligan for advice? After all, the ladies first. Although with her appearance, it's difficult to... Even to the veil, elegant fierce glare appears and sucks like the shaft of an arrow. He quickly shut up. The detective first went up the stairs to check the scene of the death. And Zax quickly sketched something on a piece of paper and handed it over. Oh, intéressant. The mill is divided into 3 floors and is about as tall as 5 people. Ok. On a la victime qui est là. Intéressant. Juste au-dessus de la porte. Hein. Between the maintenance gondola on the 3rd floor and the window on the 2nd floor is the connecting shaft between the fan blade and the mill. C'est... Donc on a ça qui est là, ça c'est le 3e étage, 2e étage, la window, donc la fenêtre du 2e étage. En fait c'est la gondole qui est là. Pourquoi il est pendu de même? Il a clairement été lancé. On s'entend. Il a été poussé ou whatever. Là. The maintenance gondola is extremely narrow and long, and about as wide as an adult foot. Ok. Donc, c'est très mince, c'est très... c'est pas très large, là, comme surface sur laquelle on peut marcher. Donc, ça fait 12 pouces de large, c'est pas très... c'est pas très prudent, on pourrait dire. There was a layer of snow on it, but no footprints. 2 ropes were tied at the railing on the basket. 2? The left part was covered with snow, like the other parts of the railing, and there was no snow on the right part. The detective leaned against the railing and looked down. Under the wooden railing hung the cold body of the miller. Donc, celui-là ici qui n'était pas covered, on a Miller qui est là. Ici, il n'y a absolument rien. Intéressant. The rope on the left has only a section of rope head, swaying in the wind like a peddler who dared not to go home without a sail. As he tried to lean out further, the railing creaked under the pressure. The snow fell from the inclined railing, falling and disintegrated in the air. The detective's biological instinct kicked in, his fur bristling involuntarily. Blah 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 blah. Ah, ça devait ressembler pas mal à ça. Ok. Donc, on a voulu regarder un petit peu plus. Ça a craqué, on n'a pas aimé ça. T'sais, on a eu l'impression de peut-être pouvoir passer par-dessus. Donc, il y a de la neige qui est tombée, qui s'est désintégrée dans l'air. Et notre instinct biologique nous a dit de reculer malgré que notre fourrure s'est mis à pétiller d'une façon involontaire, comme un petit conflit, comme un chien qui a peur. He pulled back quickly and turned to check the situation at the entrance. Putting his right hand inside his coat and grasping the dagger he kept to defend himself from villains. It was a gift from his first love. Every time he held the dagger, it reminded the temperature of her palm on that fateful day. Are we listening to a love story or something? Please. One elegant is enough. Oh my god. The detective turned around and found nothing behind him. He went downstairs quietly and found that the two of them were where they were. The two of them were where they were. Quand tu veux vraiment faire ça compliqué, as if they had not moved. He went back to the second floor and looked up from the window. Above his head was the rotating shaft of the windmill blade, with gleamed black from grease, from the daily rotation and maintenance. Il y a le shaft qui est de rotation, donc où ce que les hélices en fait du windmill s'attachent, qu'on peut voir du bas de la fenêtre, puis il est noir de graisse. D'après à cause de la rotation et tout qu'il a fait dans le jour et de la maintenance. Donc, il l'aurait déjà réparé, right? The shadow cast by the rotating axis hit the detective's face, which gave him a very uncomfortable feeling. As he was, some prehistoric hunter shuddering in terror at the sight of some giant beast. The gears of the windmill were exposed, about 30 centimeters away from the upper eaves of the window. The triangular teeth were distributed around the related shift. Ok, fait que là, il parle des gears qui alentour. The detective put his hand into his coat pocket and gently ran his thumb across the edge of the prism he carried. Something came to his mind. The detective looked out of the window again. The lowest gear groove seemed to be more worn than the others. Uh-oh, okay. He went back to the first floor, passing by the living room and straight into the kitchen. Donc, the oven seemed to have been used recently, and the kitchen filled with a mixture of the pungent smell of charcoal and the delicious grain smell of barley bread. He opened the oven and flicked the ashes with a stick. The shape of a piece of charcoal under the ashes reminded him of the prism in his pocket, like a wedge. Donc, ok. Là, de ce que je vois qu'il est en train de dire, on a un gear qui a l'air d'avoir été forcé ou quoi que ce soit du style, puis arrêté, ce qui a fait en sorte qu'il a gossé un peu, puis il y a un des edges qui est brisé. On a un charcoal qui a l'air du prisme, qui a l'air d'un wedge, qui a l'air d'avoir peut-être été placé là pour forcer le fameux Miller à aller réparer le windmill. Ça a l'air d'être un meurtre. Having gathered the necessary evidence, the detective returned to the living room to question the witness. Noticing the detective's approach, Elena sat upright with hand support, her eyes dropping. Elle pleure, la fleur. She was dressed in a light blue midnight dress. Her eyes were red and swollen. Her facial flush was calmed, and it was easy to see the state of disorder despite her attempts to cover it. Enzax coughed a few times, and when he spoke again, it was in a higher feminine voice. Il fait, est-ce que je le fais? Welcome, Mr. Detective. I assume this visit is related to my father's death. It'd be nice if you talk this way more often. It's really hard to speak like this. Come on, show us your dedication to your craft. N'oubliez pas que c'est un barde. It took the detective about 10 minutes to persuade the apprentice to go upstairs with his servant, lest one of their testimonies influence the others. After formally introducing himself and some brief preparation, the detective asked her to tell the story of that night. Oh, nice! Ok, ça c'est la première fois, on voit ça. The testimony of Elena 1. Yesterday, after dinner, my father went to the tavern as usual. I finished my housework after about 8 o'clock. It was about 2 hours before my father came back. Nothing seemed strange. I then went up to Hans's room to chat with him. 2 hours passed by, and we didn't realize that my father had yet to return as normal. It wasn't until around 11 o'clock that we realized how late it really was. I hurried downstairs, thinking my father was quietly sitting in the living room, ready to scold me. But he wasn't there. The door was closed and no one was in the living room. I had a feeling that something terrible must have happened. It was like a snake had slithered under the door and crackled up my spine to whisper in my ear. I don't know if it was because of the wind or the old hinges, but the door on that day was more difficult to open than usual. I pushed the door open and the wind blew the snow into the house. I propped the door open and made my way outside. When I got under the windmill, I had a strange thought, like an itch on my back that couldn't be scratched, and I couldn't help but look up. Hanging above my head was a purple face that was swollen and swaying in the wind. His eyes were as prominent as goldfishes. Saliva had flowed down his open, screaming mouth and frozen into ice on his snout and fur. I was frightened, so I rushed back into the house and closed the door. I couldn't sleep. Je m'excuse, c'est quelqu'un qui me déconcentre à côté. I couldn't sleep afterwards. Every time I closed my eyes, I could still see that face. I can't believe that was my father. As she finished her description of the horrible situation, Elena collapsed on the sofa with her hands covering her face. At this time, the detective smelled something fishy in her testimony. Something really fishy. Il n'y a aucune trace qui sort dehors. Pourquoi qu'elle serait sortie? After a thorough of her testimony, the detective found the irreconcilable contradiction between the testimony and the evidence. Which evidence contradicts Elena's testimony? Okay. C'est quoi son testimony? The miller went to the pub after dinner and I went to Anne's rooms. When she went out, she saw the dead miller. She was so frightened that she shut the door. Okay. C'est les footprints. Je suis sûr que c'est ça. C'est la seule chose qui fait du sens. Comme de quoi there were footprints in the outer ring of the snow, one of which reached the door. In front of the last footprints, there was a jumble of tracks. There were circular imprints around the last footprints in front of the door. Il y en a une qui reach la porte. Footprints! Oh, give me some details. The paradox is... Si elle serait sortie, effectivement, elle aurait détruit les footprints. Il n'y aurait pas juste un set de footprints qui s'en irait vers la porte. If Helena had gone out, she would have certainly stepped on the Miller's footprints. Donc on a un set de footprints qui s'en vient. C'est le Miller. On peut pas avoir plus qu'un set. En fait, on pourrait avoir plus qu'un set seulement si quelqu'un d'autre avait été avec lui ou quelqu'un d'autre avait sorti de la maison. Si elle était vraiment sortie de la maison, elle aurait pilé dans les footsteps, ou du moins proche, ou très très proche des footsteps de son père. Ce qui aurait fait en sorte que les traces de pas auraient été détruites. C'est sûr. But we established the only footprints on the scene were the one set that goes straight to the gate of the mill, and there are no other footprints like them. In other words, Helena didn't go out at all. Yes, but we don't know the motive until the next inquiry. The detective tied his sleeve and carefully pointed out the errors in Helena's testimony. And I recall, Miss Helena, you just said you went out to check outside. Yeah. Then, why is there only one set of footprints from the outside of the house to the gate of the mill? Well, I must be so scared that my memory is confused. Let me start over. Oh, deuxième testimony corrected. Yesterday, after dinner, my father went to the tavern as usual. I went upstairs for Hans to chat. 2 hours passed by, and there was no sign for my father's return. I went downstairs around 11 and found that he had no comeback. I opened the door, and my father's distorted head appeared as the body swung outside. I was so scared that I ran back to the house and closed the door. The scene was so frightening that my memory was confused. That night, every time I closed my eyes, that horrible face would pop up. I couldn't sleep at all. As long as a lie is told, more lies are bound to be used to cover it up. It's a pity that even the most talented folk can't make up every lie perfectly, let alone under such pressure. Miss Helena, there's really no need to hide anything from me. Even the detective saw through the lies she made up this time, which evidently contradicts Helena's testimony. Clairement, elle dit, elle a vu la face de son père quand il était pendu par les pieds, right? Impossible parce que le corps est plus haut que la porte. With the windmill's blade, you know? It's the position of the body. C'est impossible. La tête est beaucoup trop haut pour dire quoi que ce soit dans ce genre-là. Uncle Helena see his head in the door of the miller's pass, where even with the windmill's blade. Helena saw what she would not have seen, only because she was actually out there and cleaned up her footprints when she came back. Not to mention cleaning up her footprints is suspicious. Why would you need to clean your footprints if you're just a witness? Perhaps she panicked and did something that would implicate herself accidentally? Or the whole scene she described was just some sort of delusion? That could be true. As you said, you saw the face of the deceased in the door. This is definitely impossible for you with the current position of the body. Corpses don't simply move after death, do they? How cold. I don't even know. Helena screamed hysterically and ran out of the living room. It seemed that he couldn't get near her for a while. So the detective went upstairs to visit another witness, Hans. The detective saw Hans upstairs. He was wearing a soft hat, a burlap jacket, and brown linen trousers. The dark grey eyes under the brim made the detective uncomfortable for some reason. That kind of look reminded him of a colleague he met in another case several years before. A wolf with beautiful blue eyes that had an unruly and wild gaze. Don't push it, you. I know you're talking about me. Don't push it. T'auras pas une scène. Ça marche pas de même. Calm down, man. As I started to get up, I was pressed back on my seat by son Tikla. He's still so sensitive about conflict between customers. 5 years ago, someone made a mistake of starting a fight in his tavern. He grabbed the guy with only one paw and threw him across the street. Somehow, this handwriting. C'est sûr que ça l'a attiré plus de rire le client, c'est sûr. Je sais pas qu'est-ce qu'ils pensaient. Est-ce qu'ils sont tous masochistes? And the detective noticed that the hair on his paws seemed to be darker than elsewhere. Ouh! Donc, la fourrure sur sa main est plus noire qu'ailleurs. On sait que le shaft était graisseux. Puis on sait qu'il y a quelque chose qui a été mis dans un des gears qui ressemble à du charcoal. Du charcoal, ça laisse des marques noires. C'est louche! C'est louche! The detective's face remained unchanged. He lowered his hat to cover his spying eyes. Mr. Hans, hope you don't mind. I'm just doing my job. The detective sat in the wooden chair opposite of Hans and handed his cane to the servant beside him. I would like to hear about what happened last night. Those straightforward words, Mr. Detective. Well, I sure will try my best. The testimony of Hans. Yesterday after dinner, like every ordinary night, the miller went to the pub to pass the time. Elena and I stayed in the mill to watch the house. He stayed in the room until 11 o'clock. Then found out that the miller didn't come back at his usual time. Elena went downstairs to check while I hurried back to my room. It wasn't long before I heard Elena screaming downstairs at the sound of the door being slammed. I went downstairs and saw Elena, pale and slumped, on the ground. I took her back to the room. She told me off and on about what she saw outside the door. I stayed at her bedside all night to keep her company. Okay, just one question. Is there anything suspicious? Le bang, le slam. On l'a pas entendu dire qu'elle avait slamé la porte, right? Could Elena really be capable of slamming the door so hard? Even the weakest woman can produce explosive strength under the pressure, when under the influence of extreme emotion. Like the last time you requested a fighting guest get out of the pub. Oh, that was the me being calm. But you're welcome to try me if you don't believe it. Oh damn! S'il était calme quand il a lancé son client, là au bord de la rue. I'm a bit out of practice, but it wouldn't be difficult to throw you both out, with you in one end and Enzox in the other. Tap! Il est pas payé Cameroun. What did I do wrong? Is there anything suspicious? The miller went to the pub after dinner, and Anne stayed with Elena from 8 to 11. Then Elena went down to check, and stayed with Elena after that. Puis lui, qu'est-ce qu'il a fait? No moving around? Is it true that they didn't walk like they said? Not only is this suspicious, but also their previous alibi. Supposing that they collude with each other to commit a crime, it's necessary for them to prove each other's absence. Is there anything suspicious? Their testimony is contradictory about their room. Obviously, the wording seems to be a little subtle. What about it? Elle a dit que c'était la chambre de Hans. The miller went to the pub after Hans stayed with Elena from 8. Il était pas dans la même pièce. Il a pas mentionné qu'il était dans sa pièce. Went down to check. Elena said she went to Anne's room to chat with him, but Anne's testimony just now seems to mention that he went back to my room. It may not be the same room. It seems like one of them forgot to prepare testimony in haste. What a curious little wolf pup. What are you then? A frigid old cat? Oh boy! It looks could kill. The glare Elegant gave me would have struck me dead. Mr. Hans, I have a small question. It has nothing to do with the case, and more with me being a jealous old soul faced with two young lovers. Oh, pas non. J'ai tout le temps mon portefeuille dans ma poche, puis là ça me gossait. Je le tiens jamais dans ma poche quand je stream, puis ça paraît. Je suis pas confortable là-dessus. Ok. In which room do you usually date in? Well, in Elena's room. Ooh. Hans, tu viens de te mettre les pieds dans les plats, mon cher. Elle a dit que c'est dans ta pièce à toi, puis toi, tu dis que c'est dans ta pièce à elle. Ça regarde pas bien. If that were the case, then Elena's testimony contradicts yours. She told me that you two were in your room, as usual. Oh, really? She may just be confused by the shock. Or was she so frightened that she forgot the alibi you agreed on in advance? What are you talking about? I don't even know. Hans kept fiddling with his hands, and the fine beads of sweat moistened the short hairs of your foreheads. His grey eyes avoided the detective gaze. Donc, il n'ose pas regarder le détective. Il joue avec ses mains, ce qui est un signe de panique. Il commence à avoir de la sueur qui commence à descendre beaucoup trop facilement sur son front. Ça regarde mal pour Hans. Oh, please excuse me, Mr. Hans. It's just my speculation after all. Okay. But I wouldn't choose a partner who get nervous so easily if I were you. Your hands shake when you're nervous. Can you even grab the rope with those? The detective could read Hans' tense behavior like a book, and now he needed only a little physical evidence to prove his conjecture. The detective went out to the snowfield where the body had been lowered from the windmill by the servant. The miller's body was spread out in the snow, so that anybody could see it. As the detective inspected the now neatly arranged corpse, he couldn't help but grimace. After reprimanding the servant who had carelessly moved the body, he went to investigate it. Oh, scene investigation. Nice. Please click in the place you want to investigate on the picture to collect the evidence. Cool! Oh! Hello? He put on his glove, pulled aside the miller's coat, and revealed his thick fur. He could feel the liquefying fat under the miller's skin. The miller looked quite plump, thanks to his wealthy life. Is this even related to the case? Don't add so many pointless details to the case. Who knows? Perhaps it may be relevant somehow. Oui. Il a arraché du poil. Il a arraché du poil. Regardez ça, juste ici. The detective looked at his curled up fingers and found gray fur inside his nails, which matched his own fur color. Under the miller's fur on his chest, there were scratches. Ok, il se serait gratté. Regardez la cheville. The miller's ankle was tied with safety rope, cheap but reliable. The knot was a hangman's noose. And now he plans to sell us rope. I'm not a merchant. Autrement? No, that passe. The detective looked closely at his face. He was scared by the dead miller's twisted face, even though it wasn't his first time seeing anybody. The miller's wide-open eyes were growing cloudy and lifeless. His wrinkles were getting clearer due to his stiff facial muscle. His mouth stayed shut, but silent fear still escaped from it. He had been greatly frightened. The miller's fur remained fluffy, with no sign of strangle mark. He got up and finished the search. Now he knew what had happened. And now, let's put the piece back together. Wait, there's still a lot of questions to be solved. Didn't you take notes for the evidence? Take a good look. It seems that the main problem with this case lies in the cause of the miller's death, the weapon that killed him, whether he was murdered, and the killer's motive. The process of how the case happened is also noteworthy. If it's impossible to confirm the sequence of events, we should focus on the factors that change with time, such as weather. Quick Q&A. Please click the mobile icon to answer a question. The mobile icon? Wait, what? Qu'est-ce qu'il faut que je fasse? Ah! C'est bien laggy. Bon, voilà. Weapon. What's your opinion on the murder weapon? Les hitbox sont bizarres, c'est pas grave. What's the murder weapon? Oh my god, imaginez! Imaginez! Il y avait sa propre fourrure dans sa main. Donc c'est clairement agrippé, le chest. Puis s'est arraché le poil, right? Il a la face frightened, donc apeuré. Il a clairement eu un choc. Il est mort d'une crise de cœur, le monsieur. An invisible weapon. Interesting. How about murdering him with the shock which was caused by the sudden drop? Not everyone will so easily scared as you are. But anyone would be shocked if they were hung without any preparation. Let alone a drunk, overweight miller. Indeed, I suppose a sudden death could be possible because of those external factors. Seems like this time the detail wasn't just to add dramatic flair. Of course, every detail is necessary. So why did you take nearly half an hour to describe the suspects? Ça ralentit la roue, c'est ça qui a fait bugger. Pas grave. Motif. Quoi? Ok, je peux juste la méthode. Bon. What's the process of crime? Deductive reasoning. Arrange the occurrence chronologically from top to bottom, bright ragging chips to each position. The suspect leaped the miller into the air. The rope left. Les persos sont cool en vrai. Ouais, ils sont vraiment nice. Pour vrai, le art de ce jeu-là est vraiment bien fait, là. The suspect tied the rope to the miller's neck. Non, il a pas été... Ok, il y en a juste 5, mais semble aussi. The rope hitched to the miller's ankle. The suspect ran away after committing the crime. The suspect burned down the wooden wedge. The suspect tied the rope to the miller's neck. Ça, c'est pas vrai. Ça, c'est impossible. The suspect lifted the miller into the air. The rope left a circular mark on the ground. The suspect dropped the rope. Ok. Donc, le suspect 4. Le rope s'est attaché après le... Ok, ça... Il a laissé... Parce qu'il était à terre, il a laissé une trace alentour de la dernière trace de pied qu'il y avait, c'est logique. Il a pas run away, il est resté sur place. Oh. Pull out if you arrange the events in chronological order. You can manage your thought about the case much easier in this way. Start with 5 chips from the top to the bottom, then place your bet without hesitation, easy peasy. Ça veut dire que c'est pas bon. Ah, intéressant. Et on va dans le log ici. Ok, c'est tout ça. Démettre. Je veux pas tout relire. On a-tu accès au clou? On n'a pas accès au clou. Une idée, quelqu'un? On sait que ça l'a... C'est sûr, celui-là ici, là, c'est non, parce qu'il est à l'envers. Celui-là ici, c'est non, parce qu'il est pas... Il a vraiment... Il s'est vraiment pas enfui après pour être comme il crème, il est resté là. Fait que pas mal sûr que j'ai les 5 bons, mais ils sont juste pas dans le bon ordre. Il y en a 2 seulement dans le bon ordre, 3 qui sont mal placés. Donc je commençais par ça, mais je pense pas que c'est celle-là en premier. Drop the rope from the maintenance basket. Ah, après, à la fin. Le 4, ce serait à la fin, ce serait pas au début. Ben dis-moi après que l'autre soit dans les heures. Parce qu'il y avait une corde au sol. Right? Fait que pour commencer, ça serait ça. Oups. Ça. Il l'a levé dans les airs. Mais j'en avais deux de bons, par exemple. Je suis en train de tout changer de place. Ça. Oh! Ouais, mais c'est ça que j'ai fait. Fait que ceux-là sont à exclure. Parce que c'était pas le Miller's Neck, fait que ça marche pas. C'est bol. Un peu, hein? C'était si simple pourtant. Si simple. À moins qu'il ait commencé par ça. Parce que clairement, il était en bas quand il s'est fait pogner le. De même. Il y en a juste une de bonne. Tantôt, j'avais 4 là. J'avais 6 là. 2 là. 1 puis 7. Ça veut dire que. Il y en avait une des 3 qui était en haut qui était bonne. Puis 1 ou 7 est bonne. Pour moi, c'est 7 qui est bon, là. Parce que ça, il doit l'avoir fait à la toute fin. Et là, il n'y a plus rien de ça qui serait bon. Si je vois selon cette logique-là. Fait que si je vois de même. Il l'a tiré dans les airs, le truc s'est accroché après sa cheville. Non! C'est moi qui comprends mal, là. C'est clairement moi qui me comprends mal. Encore là, j'en ai juste une de bien placée. Guys, avez-vous une idée de comment on devrait placer ça pour que ça marche bien? On se rappelle les fêtes. Donc, il y a la dernière empreinte de pied est proche de la porte, il est lifté dans les airs, ok? Il y a un cercle alentour de l'empreinte de pied qui nous dit que logiquement, la corde était déjà au sol, right? Ensuite, il a monté d'environ un étage de la tête en bas. Hey, je veux pas rester coincé là, c'est pas vrai. Pas ce soir, pas ce soir. Juste essayer quelque chose, juste pour le fun. Je peux-tu placer un bed de même? Ouais, c'est ça, ok. Fait que logiquement, c'était le 4 puis lui. Yep. Ok. Fait que là, on sait le début, on sait la fin. Donc, il a drop la rope, puis le suspect part. Mais il nous manque les 3 dans le milieu. Puis je me rappelle pas dans quel ordre je les ai mis tantôt. Regarde que la marque, elle devrait déjà être là. Logiquement. Juste 3 chips. Bon, ok, c'est parfait. On était pas loin. On était pas loin au départ, puis j'ai tout mélangé par après. Voilà. Like, may have been a component, but it's not impossible. Le motif. Le motif du meurtre. Let's talk about the motive then. First of all, we have already established that the miller got along well with villagers. So what could the motivate for murder be? Ok. Donc, qu'est-ce qui pourrait être le motif d'avoir tué? What's the possible motive? Love. Daughter's relationship. The miller wouldn't allow the relationship between his daughter and the apprentice. You mean, did someone murder him so the pair could be together? It's not necessary to kill him just because of a disagreement though. So that means something recently happened to provoke the culprit into killing the miller quickly. Then the identity of the criminal is obvious. Even so, there's no need to kill him. Ha! Who is the culprit? I think it's obvious now. The criminal is... Est-ce que vous pensez que c'est juste Hans, Helena ou les deux? C'est sûr que c'est pas someone else. C'est soit un ou l'autre ou les deux. C'est dur à dire, hein? C'est sûr que elle, les deux alibi se contredisent. Ouais. Mais est-ce que Helena veut juste protéger Hans? Mais dans ce cas-là, même à ça, ce serait both of them. It was both of them. Les deux. C'est ça, je pense aussi. Yep. They share the common benefit and the operation of the trap needs cooperation. Then the whole picture of this case is crystal clear. How come you're so excited since you aren't the one who solved the puzzle? I'm just excited to see you work, okay? So the whole story of the case is... Oh, nice! A case playback. The miller was a nice guy, but he was particularly picky about his daughter's relationship, especially her relationship with his apprentice. But even he couldn't stop their love from blossoming. The two young people seized every moment they got to be together. And this situation had been going on for a while. As eager as they were to be open with their relationship, they couldn't bear the miller's denial of their love any longer. All of a sudden, the miller made an important decision. That is... Il a pas accepté leur mariage, sinon il l'aurait pas tué. The miller had picked out a satisfactory candidate among his daughter's suitors and Anna's indecision to her. Donc il a voulu la marier à quelqu'un d'autre. The miller thought he had arranged a good marriage. Naturally, his special generosity made his acquaintance at the tavern extremely enthusiastic. On se rappelle qu'il a payé énormément de verres de tourner cette soirée-là. Which is why they decided to kill the miller that night. The lovers were supposed to escape that night after they finished the deed, but the heavy snow and another accident forced them to change their plan. After the miller went out, Hans tied a noose with the safety rope and lowered it down from the third floor maintenance gondola. By the way, the noose is the method used to hang murderers. Oh boy. Un nous coulet. Their original plan might have been for Helena to meet the miller on the first floor, but the knot hanging from the mill around his neck. Hanging around from the mill around his neck. Then Helena sent a signal to Hans and let him pull the rope to hang the miller. But even the calmest people may make a costly mistake when they kill for the first time. At about 10 o'clock, Hans shook when he got nervous, lost his grip on the rope, and dropped the knot in the snow, leaving the circular imprints. Nina, who had just opened the door and was ready to greet her father, saw the noose fall on the ground. She probably wanted to warn Hans to take it back, but the miller was already close by then. It will attract the miller's attention if the rope was pulled back up. The murder attempt should have failed by that point, but by sheer coincidence, the miller took a wrong step that changed the whole thing. Yeah, stepped on ring. He stepped into the noose by accidentally. At that time, Hans had just grabbed the rope outside the maintenance gondola. When the miller's paw moved forward into the snow, the rope was pulled. Hans felt the pull and instinctively pulled up the rope, accordingly to the original plan, pulling the miller's up by his ankle. The miller fell on the snow before he was pulled into the air, leaving the messy mark in front of his footprints as he struggled. Hans hung the miller in the air, dared not to let go of the rope, and let him struggle in the air. After a while of struggling and cursing, the face of the miller changed from red to purple. And as more and more blood rushed into his head, his movement became weaker and weaker until they stopped. Helena and Hans wanted to escape after this comedy of success, but finally decided to disguise the scene as if the miller had accidentally died and planned their testimonies. After all, as long as they could get rid of the suspicion of murder, they could inherit the mill. The reward for taking such a risk was extremely good. Hans tied the safety rope to the maintenance gondola, pretending that the miller had tied the rope himself. However, it had snowed by that time. The rope tied to the fence pushed the snow off. Therefore, there was no snow on the right side. He also stuck a wooden hedge in the windmill gear and made the windmill stop spinning. As the distant villagers saw the windmill stop, they will naturally think that the miller accidentally fell and died while repairing the windmill. The morning the detective arrived was sunny and windless. The windmill wouldn't spin even without the wooden wedge stuck in. This was his chance to throw the wedge into the breadstone and destroy the evidence. Then all he needed to do was just go back to the room and wait until dawn. If you don't look closely at the scene, you will think that the miller died by accident. Although it looks intriguing at first, it's actually a novice puzzle with many loopholes. Next time, I'll give the legendary detective Roman a much more difficult puzzle. After the long investigation, the detective told everyone his interference in the tavern and left the final decision to the villagers. The snow stopped. The detective opened the door of the snow-covered tavern. Thick snow still covered the paved road, and the detective set foot on the road home. It's late. Looks like there won't be any more customer tonight, so I'm going to close up for the night. If you need anything, please come to the third floor to find me. Tsarn gave me an elegant room keys, closed the tavern, and went upstairs. Then, perhaps it's time for me to go upstairs. I dare not risk being locked out by Tsarn if it's too late. There are 3 beds in the attic. Tsarn usually has 2 beds for himself, so he can have enough space to stretch his limbs. The third bed is usually rent at a low price to acquaintance who needs accommodation on a tight budget, such as Enzox. Elegant and I sat at the same round table, staring at each other silently. Is there anything else to do tonight? Oh, people. I want to talk more with Elegant. She's very interesting. Before I could move, Elegant moved the chair to get closer. Actually, the puzzle is not complete yet. Isn't it? Whether it's the murder, the motive, or the method of committing the crime, they're all solved. Is there something else? Of course. The judgment. That doesn't matter, does it? Detective can use their authority to influence the outcome of the case. For example, if it was intentional homicide, negligent homicide, or just an unfortunate accident. What the detective says will, in the end, determine the judgment. You're wrong. Every detective that earns his position will swear his loyalty to the truth. And that same truth is also determined by the detective, is it not? For example, in this case, do you believe that they killed the miller by accident? Or did they kill the miller intentionally? What if they just wanted to intimidate the miller into cancelling the engagement? What is your judgment? If I were the detective, I would tell the villagers. Est-ce que c'est vraiment une mort accidentelle ou un homicide? Je suis pas mal sûr qu'au départ c'était un homicide. Right? Pas mal sûr que c'était pas juste des faire peur qui retroussent le chemin. En fait. Pas mal sûr de mon côté. C'est un homicide. Ça serait ben étonnant que ce soit accidentel. C'est surtout accidental death. T'sais, à un moment donné, t'es en haut, tu fais pas tout pour faire en sorte que il y ait de la mort. Là. Ils ont même été jusqu'à mettre de quoi dans le moulin pour qu'il arrête de tourner. Je veux bien, mais. Puis, si c'était vraiment accidentel, il aurait probablement pas planifié de mettre la corde à l'entour du cou à la base. Juste ça de même. I will say it's murder. Is that not too arbitrary? Their aim is to stop the engagement, which is not enough to kill for. I think it's enough. Killing isn't something that needs special reason. Even the most trivial things can drive someone to kill. Besides, the way they committed the crime. I think they just failed in their original plan, then chose another way. Perhaps. I finished the rest of my beer. Oh, great detective. You can really drink a lot. It's not like I'm downing the liquor. It doesn't matter if I have a cup or two. I pointed at to the cider that she only had a sip from in front of her. After hearing your reasoning just now, it is definitely not something a drunkard could come up with. Then I'll take that as a compliment. By the way, a quick tip for you. I approached her and said, "Your clothes look a bit out of place in the tavern. Everyone's going to notice a teetotaling nun in the middle of a group of drunks." Hey! C'est le symbole de tantôt. Je l'avais même pas remarqué. If you're planning to stay here, I'm afraid you'll just end up scaring away the target of your investigation.
C'est ce qui met fin à notre deuxième épisode. Donc, comme vous allez pouvoir, on va avoir plusieurs outils à notre disposition pour résoudre des meurtres. Donc, notre détective est bien équipé en étant un loup et tout ça, avec son raisonnement, son nez et plusieurs autres choses. Il va pouvoir résoudre les meurtres qu'on va avoir à faire face. Ce petit scénario n'était qu'un prologue à ce qui nous attend, du moins, on pense bien. Donc, j'ai bien hâte de découvrir le reste et j'espère que vous aussi. Entre-temps, si vous voulez voir l'action en live sur Twitch, vous allez avoir le lien juste ici. Sinon, vous pouvez le retrouver dans la description de cette vidéo. Je vous souhaite une excellente fin de journée ou une excellente fin de soirée, tout dépendant de ce qui s'applique à vous. Et prenez soin de vous. Bye bye.